Hello, everyone. Thanks for making time for me today. As I was introduced, I'm the Identity Standards Architect for the Content Authenticity Initiative project at Adobe. And so I'm going to take a few minutes here to talk about a few different pieces of the project and how identity links into that. So I'll talk a little bit about the who, the what, and the why of content authenticity. And then I'll talk a bit about the data model that we've presented and some current work that we're doing to talk about identity as it relates to content. So let's start with the why. I mean, there's no shortage of content that's out there today that's designed to misinform and mislead and get people to believe things that are not true and affect all manner of public issues in the world. And the reality is that genie isn't going to go back into the bottle, right? We can't make this go away, but what we can do and what we are trying to do as part of our project is to provide a mechanism for well-intentioned content creators to stand apart from that onslaught of misinformation. So the goals really of the Content Authenticity Initiative are to allow content creators to make statements about their content that are tamper-evident and digitally signed, and then to allow content consumers to evaluate those statements and use them to help understand what they're seeing and how they should interpret it. And to be really clear, we are not about fact-checking, fake image detection. We're not politically opinionated. I want to take a moment in particular to talk about detection because there are certainly tools out there that can understand at some moment the state of the art of misinformation and misleading creation of assets, but that's not a sustainable approach. We'll create a tool that understands today's technology, and tomorrow there are better deepfake tools, and we don't see that as being a sustainably winnable war. I'm going to give a quick moment here to talk through how this works in Photoshop. And this is a demo that some teammates of mine put together that sort of gives a quick example of what we're talking about. So I'm going to start with a stock image of the pyramids at Giza. And I'm going to have a little fun with this one. I'm going to tweak the colors a little bit on this one and paint a little bit of a different story. So, let's put some clouds in behind there. We don't usually have clouds. And then just for real fun, we're going to make it look like it's snowing at the pyramids. But we're going to be an ethical storyteller here. So we're going to add content credentials to this. We're going to export this, and we're going to publish that to the Content Credentials Cloud. And here it is in a social media site mockup. And when you look at this, when we inspect, you can see actually the family tree of how that photo was created. So we disclose that there were the 3 stock images. We disclose what the original looked like, and you can see a before and after as the manipulations are revealed. So that's just a very, very quick sort of sense of the kinds of things that we're prepared to help people attest to as they create content on the internet. There are 3 organizations that are active that we've helped create. There is the Content Authenticity Initiative, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, and the Creator Assertions Working Group. And these are, serve slightly different purposes. The CAI really talks about outreach for policy and education, advocates for the use of affirmative provenance as a solution to the problems of misinformation and disinformation, and then also is where a lot of the open source and open standards work that we do comes from. Sometimes this is confusing. It's both a nonprofit organization that is this business alliance. It is also the name of the team that I am part of at Adobe that implements many of these things and also is responsible for integrations with Adobe products and services. C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, is a technical standards organization formed under the Linux Foundation, and it really is defining the what and the how. So, what is the asset look like? What is the technical standard for embedding that information into an asset or linking to it outside of it? What are the steps that were taken to produce the asset that you're viewing? And you can think of this really as what can the hardware or software that's implementing the standard is itself prepared to attest to, and then an extensibility framework for others to add more information should they choose to. And in that sort of extensibility framework, we have created the Creator Assertions Working Group, which is really technical standards about who. So what do humans and organizations want to say about the content as they're creating it? And I'll send around the slide deck to the organizers afterwards, but these are links for the different organizations that I've been talking to. So, who is active in this? At the time that I built the slide, we had about 2,500 members, well-known device manufacturers, news organizations, other software vendors, that are all active in creating this standard and advocating for it. Since then, I've learned that we've now crossed about 3,000 members. And among those, we're super happy to welcome Leica, who has had cameras since last year that have content credentials built into the camera, and Nikon and Sony have announced that they will be doing so within this year. Over at the CTPA, where we talk about the technical standards, there are a good 100 members, largely overlapping those of content authenticity, but there are a few others here as well. And with that, I'm going to turn to a really quick overview of what the technical standards allow. So we start by saying that we want to describe digital content. And in the C2PA world, that's called an asset. So that is one piece of digital media, a still image, a video, a soundtrack, a PDF document, a font, and potentially other forms of digital media as well. We describe that with what we call a C2PA manifest. And I will zoom in on this a little bit in some upcoming slides. But a C2PA manifest describes one particular asset as it's the final rendition of it. That might refer to ingredient manifests. So in the example that I showed before, I showed bringing in various stock imagery to combine them to make a new asset. And that's the kind of workflow that I'm showing here. So there may be any number of ingredients and any number of sort of hierarchy of how those are created. And that collection of C2PA manifests is referred to as a C2PA manifest store. That can either be embedded into an asset directly or linked through some kind of cloud storage. Digging into those boxes that I said I would dig into, the sort of core building block of the C2PA manifest is what we call an assertion. And that's basically a binary blob of data that could be any number of different things. Typically, it's something like a JSON or a JPEG. And those allow us to describe the rest of the content, what the capture device knows, for instance, time and location of capture, edit actions. So in Photoshop, that might be the steps that you take in Photoshop from one ingredient to the final product, such as the compositing that I showed. We typically include a thumbnail of the content and then reference other ingredients that were incorporated. Assertions can be redacted in future manifests. This might be done for privacy or editorial reasons. Typically serialized in CBOR, and as of the 2.0 standard for C2PA, that now reflects content that is directly machine attestable, or at least the standard only describes those. But assertions are labeled, and this is the extension framework I was talking about before. Those can be defined by other organizations. So some examples of things that come from non-C2PA organizations, identity, which we'll talk to in a few minutes. And then that also is a place where you can express intent for training and data mining. So the assertions are packaged together in what we call a claim, which basically includes a hash link to each of the assertions. That's one way that we prevent substitution of different assertions at a later time. This also includes information about who created the claim. So for instance, Photoshop or a camera might identify themselves here. And then it also is the place where you can say, hey, as part of creating this claim or this manifest, I've redacted assertions from prior manifests. And finally, that is all signed by the software or hardware that implements C2PA. So again, a Photoshop or a camera might issue that claim signature that binds all of this together and provides the tamper-evident link to the other data that I've mentioned so far. So C2PA manifest really combines all of that together into one unified description of the asset. And since I've mentioned some of the pieces here, you can see how those pieces then could be described in a user interface, such as the site that we run at contentcredentials.org that allows you to inspect that content. And all of this is open standards, open source, so there could be, and there are in fact, other implementations of this as well. So I will close with a few minutes here on the work that we're doing in the Creator Assertions Working Group to allow individuals and organizations to declare their identity and their roles within the production of an asset. So the reason we're doing this is to ensure that that organizational or individual identity is securely bound to the content. We had taken an approach to this in the C2PA 1.1 series of specifications that didn't provide that assurance, and that's part of the reason that creative work assertion has been deprecated. And given that C2PA is really focused on machine attestable content, we needed a new location for this information. Quick description of the design goal of this. It's really about allowing people to document their role in a tamper-evident way and in a way that's independently verifiable. So what do I mean by all of that? Let's start with an overview of what the identity assertion is and how it links to the rest of the C2PA ecosystem. So the identity assertion allows a credential holder, somebody who's identified by an X509 or a verifiable credential or some other form of identity, to sign something we call the signer payload. And basically that's references to other parts of the C2PA manifest and to the asset that it describes. And then it can also allow that person to, or that organization to describe their role. For instance, a creator, a contributor, an editor, a funder, so on and so forth. And this is a new and separate trust signal compared to what's in the C2PA manifest and what the hardware or software that I talked to earlier describes. And typically it means the subject of that credential is indicating their authorization or their active participation in the production of this asset. And I think I mentioned the credential forms that are currently described. This too is an extensible framework, so other forms of credentials could be added by the Creator Assertions Working Group in the future, or other organizations could also describe that. And the identity assertion can be repeated. So you might have, for instance, a multi-user application might record the steps taken by each participant and document those separately. So the A1 and A2, for instance, could be actions assertions describe the steps that each participant played in this. Or in the lower diagram, it might be a situation where, for instance, a photographer working for a particular news organization might be the inner one, the identity assertion one, and the news organization itself might be identity assertion 2, which sort of steps in and says, yes, this photographer works for us and is correctly identified here. So with that, I'll close. If there are people here who are particularly interested in the definition of this standard, it is ongoing. We typically meet on Mondays at 8:30 in the US Pacific time zone, which I think is 4:30 your time in London. And I would love to hear from people who are interested in that. And if there are questions, I'm open to those.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have a question for Eric or for John, who's in the audience?
We've got time for one question, and I can just take that.
Yeah, we've got one at the back.
Hi, Eric. Thanks very much. Great tech. It's David Morgan here from the High Foundation. Just wondering if it's possible to interrogate any asset that's posted on social media as well. I think that wasn't covered.
Yes. Social media are sort of notorious these days for stripping metadata that's unfamiliar. And so sometimes you may have the CTPA signals that we've talked about, but also one of the things that we're doing to work with that, and it's actually good that John is in the audience as he's really leading this effort, is to add watermarking that can then link back to CTPA manifests that are externally stored. So if you get a chance to talk with John in the hallway afterwards, he can talk more to how that works.
Okay, well, thank you, Eric, for that great presentation. And thanks very much, John, for helping out as well. And we're on to the next session. Thank you very much.